Sometimes history doesn't scream. It doesn't kick the door down or come with sirens and smoke. Sometimes it just slips into the room, real quiet, like a whisper you weren't supposed to hear. Folks go about their business like nothing's wrong. But then something happens, and the whole world shifts. And nobody wants to talk about it. Because if they did, they'd have to admit what they let happen in plain sight. And that's what this is. A story that made the news, but then it got buried. A story that should have lived in history books, but instead, it lives in silence. But we're bringing it back. So, her name was Hattie McCray. She was 14 years old. But not just 14. She was black and 14. And all y'all know what that means. Because somehow, when a black girl is 14, she doesn't get treated like a child. She gets treated like a grown woman, sexualized, disrespected, and made to carry things she never should have to carry. Hattie's daddy passed when she was little, and her mama was doing the best she could to raise her three girls. Hattie was the youngest, but to help out, they all took jobs, even Hattie. And that's how she ended up working at a little oyster restaurant just a few blocks from home. She was just trying to help her family. That's it. She wasn't on the streets. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just a child with a job, trying to do right. But in Jim Crow New Orleans, that didn't matter, because to some, a black girl working in a restaurant was free game. Enter Charles Duran, a 27-year-old officer with the New Orleans Police Department. He was assigned to the neighborhood where Hattie's restaurant was. That man was supposed to be there to protect. Instead, he preyed on her. He'd come into the restaurant drunk. He would watch her, harass her, make her uncomfortable. He followed her around the restaurant, being inappropriate, whispering things she didn't want to hear. And this didn't just happen once. This went on for days. He got bolder and bolder. So bold, in fact, that he made those threats out loud. He told the restaurant owner if Hattie didn't give him what he wanted, he'd kill her, and nobody stopped him. One day in February 1930, Hattie was finishing up her shift. Duran had already been in and out, drunk and aggressive as usual. But now, it was almost closing time. She thought maybe she could just leave, but he came back. And this time, it was worse. He cornered her again, and Hattie tried to run. She ran into the kitchen where witnesses were standing. He chased her down, pulled his gun, and shot her in the head. She collapsed on the kitchen floor, 14 years old, shot in cold blood in the middle of her job. She was rushed to the hospital, but she died hours later. The black community in New Orleans was outraged. Churches, the NAACP, everyday neighbors, they raised money and pushed the district attorney to do something. And to be fair, the case did go to trial. Duran tried to claim self-defense, said that she came at him with a knife. But that was no knife, no threat. Witnesses said she ran from him, not toward him. So his lawyer switched it up and tried to say Duran was so drunk that he didn't even know what he was doing, and that he was temporarily insane. But even the arresting officer said otherwise. They said he was fully aware, said that he deliberately aimed, and that he was sober enough to know what he was doing. And in a surprise twist for that time, the jury actually convicted him of murder. It was the first time in New Orleans a white man was convicted of capital murder for killing a black person. But don't let that fool you, because it sounds like justice, right? Except that verdict didn't stick. The defense appealed, they pushed for an insanity hearing, and a commission of doctors, many of whom had ties to the police department, declared that Duran was legally insane. He was sent to the state mental asylum, and just 5 years later, they said he was cured. In 1937, he pled guilty to manslaughter and got sentenced to just 1 to 3 years. And by 1940, he walked away, a free man. Let me say that again. This man murdered a 14-year-old girl in front of witnesses and served less time than the Angola Three spent in solitary for crimes that weren't even violent. But that's America. But y'all know what the old folks say. God sits high and he looks low. Because just a little over a year after he walked free, he was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, not far from the same restaurant where he murdered Hattie. And guess what? He was pronounced dead at Charity Hospital, the same hospital where they pronounced Hattie dead nearly a decade earlier. I guess all that finally caught up with them. Now don't get it twisted. That ain't justice. That's just karma handling what the courts refuse to do. And if you think that's the worst part, get this. They examined Hattie's body to check if she was a virgin, as if the only way she deserved respect was if she could prove her purity, as if this child had to meet some test to be worthy of dignity. But let's be real. When have you ever heard of a white girl being murdered and needing to prove she deserved justice? Because when white women say something happened, people move, people listen, laws change, heads roll. But Hattie, she was a black girl, so she had to prove she deserved to be seen as a human, even in death. Y'all, this was a headline. It was in the paper. People knew about it. And then they forgot. Or maybe they chose to forget. Because this story doesn't fit the narrative that they like to push. The one where we are the problem. The one where we are always the aggressors. But this story flips that whole narrative on its head. And that's why we're here. To bring it back. To remind you that history doesn't just live in textbooks. Sometimes it lives in whispers, in grief, in truth that's been tucked away for too long. We remember Hattie McCray, and we refuse to let the lie be the last word. If this touched you, do what they didn't. Share her name, say her name, comment, like, subscribe, and keep coming back because we got more stories that they tried to erase. Stories they don't teach in school, but we're going to teach them anyway because memory is justice. Peace.